Xenoblade Chronicles 1, in my opinion, is a masterpiece. It is a game that is currently in my top 10 favorite games of all time, but it is also my number one favorite JRPG of all time. It is a game that I look at very fondly, and there's a lot of things about it that I just really enjoy compared to like any other RPG I've ever played. But there's a lot that can really explain as to why. I feel like there are certain things I can kind of talk about very quickly, just because I don't want to, show too much of the game in any way, in case anyone who's watching this video has yet to play the game. And for that, I'm going to go into straight the story and the music, because those things, I can talk about very quickly, I feel. Now, when it comes to the story, it isn't something that normally I'd be able to talk about very quickly, because I feel the story in Xenoblade Chronicles 1 is a story that is, like, very complicated and very long, considering it's a JRPG, and has a lot of twists and turns. And the main reason why I wouldn't talk about it for too long is because I'm not trying to spoil the game for anyone who has not played the game yet. But I will say that when it comes to the entirety of the franchise, when it comes to the entirety of Xenoblade, it does have my favorite story by far. Like, I think it's a story that far surpasses any of the others, and I don't think that's just from the writing. The writing is fantastic, though, I will point that out, but I think a lot of it has to do with just the presentation and how the cutscenes play out, how the voice acting goes, because the voice acting in this game is probably one of the best English dubs I've ever heard in my life. This is probably one of the best English dubs of all time for any Japanese video game, for me anyway. So when I go into it, it's kind of just a combination of everything, alongside the good writing, the good dialogue, the good characterization. Every character, for the most part, feels like they are important in some way, and they are good characters. Even the comic relief character Ricky, at first, when the first time I played the game, when you first get him, it kind of comes off as like almost forced comedy, like a forced comic relief type of situation, and I just didn't really care for it at first, until there is a scene much later on where they're having a conversation with one of the other party members, where I really understood how good of a character he truly was. So the game just does a really good job at making sure every character has their turn in the spotlight. So I really enjoyed the story for this game. I think it's the best story in Xenoblade. And I know that's something that some people might disagree with, depending on what your favorite is, but that's just how I feel. I think the game has the best writing, the best characterization, the best dialogue, the best quality of said dialogue through the voice acting, and it's just great. I also like that some of the story is told through gameplay, and isn't just something that you only see in cutscenes. Like, for example, if you go by the battle system having the ability to give you visions, and essentially you can able to kind of like stop the future from happening, because in the story of the game, Shulk, using the Monado, is basically able to see the future, and it happens in cutscenes. He's able to do things, or maybe even fail to save people, depending on the visions he gets. And that's the thing, it adds a lot of tension to the story, because you don't know when one vision will happen or when it won't happen. The game's pretty good at that. But it's not just in the cutscenes, it's also completely playable, where like the battle system will have a moment where a boss enemy of some kind is doing a really strong attack, and you'll get a vision and it'll come up, and you have like a certain time limit before the actual attack connects, and you can do something about it. And because of the game being built around this concept, there's a bunch of Monado skills that will essentially let you, have multiple solutions to those problems, and that's great. I love this system. I love being able to see the gameplay reflect the story in some aspect. It becomes a little disappointing whenever I play any game where it's not fully realized and you don't really see that in the gameplay. One of the earliest interactions in the game is a situation where there's an attack from the Mechon, the main antagonist of the game, where you have a situation where the weapon you have is just a normal weapon. You don't have the Monado, and Mechon are just too strong. Like, you can't dent them. You will do only like 1 HP of damage, and your weapon will bounce off unless you do a very specific combo that's explained to you earlier in the game. Once you do get the Monado, you get to pretty much like cut up all the Mechon and destroy them with very little issue, basically showing through gameplay how strong of a weapon the Monado is. I feel like it's very common for any JRPG, including future Xenoblade games, where you can get the very powerful weapon and you're attacking more or less the same, or maybe sometimes you will fight in the gameplay and win a battle, and then like later on in like one of the cutscenes you just end up losing anyway. So it's a little jarring for me anyway. So I really like that they show that in both the cutscene, the gameplay. It's kind of appreciated, I will say. The music for the game is phenomenal. There's like, it's pretty much also one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard. There's a lot of really talented people who work on this game. You got talent from people who did music on Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy and Chrono Trigger, kind of like coming together on this game and just kind of going really hard on the soundtrack, and it's probably one of the best. The song specifically, Engage the Enemy, still to this day will give me goosebumps even if I'm just listening to the song separately from the game. So I think if you're able to do that at all, that is an extremely impressive feat. I also really like how the game explains its mechanics. The game essentially starts with, you know, Shulk having to fight this little crab thing, and his friend Ryan shows up to help out, and it's essentially like this graphic that shows up explaining the mechanic to you. Ryan explains it briefly in the cutscene too, and then you have time to practice that like thing on, and pretty much that first enemy, but like any enemy after that too, because it's like a little stretch of land where you can fight regular enemies, and you kind of get used to the battle system in that way, because considering this was the first Xenoblade game, there's going to be a lot of people who treat it as the first Xenoblade game, obviously. So you need to make sure the mechanics are well explained. There's graphics, is shown like a good enemy to practice it on, and that sort of thing. So I think the tutorials were also very well done for the game, and I think that goes a long way when you're gonna play any kind of really long, like 80 to 100 hour long RPG. That also goes with like voice acting. Like if you're gonna play a JRPG with a lot of cutscenes and whatnot, the voice acting needs to be good, because if it isn't good, then that's gonna become really like draining after a long period of time of gameplay. I'm also a big fan of how certain things are structured. Like the Collectopedia in this game is essentially like a system where you can kind of just collect one of every item that is located within a certain zone. And considering how big the zones are in Xenoblade games, that's not that easy to do. But I have fun collecting anything in a lot of games. Like there's a reason why I really like much older platformers like Banjo-Kazooie, Donkey Kong 64. I like all of these games. I like collecting things. So having a Collectopedia that is basically something I can complete just by collecting things is fun. I like doing that. I also really like the affinity system, having like entire towns and colonies essentially just tied to people in them. I love the Colony 6 side quest where you could basically just rebuild an entire town, and then you can invite people to that town and then basically unlock more quests depending on who knows who. And it has this whole chart talking about like, oh, this person knows this person because they're best friends with this other person, and blah blah blah. And you can see how a whole town connects and all the people involving each other. It's not forced on you in any way, which is also appreciated, but it's just a really good system, and by design it makes me on my own want to take that initiative and go ahead and get to know these people and play the game for that reason. I really like the affinity system and the way the Collectopedia works in this game. It feels like it's designed in such a way that appeals to me specifically, where I can complete all of these things, I can get to know all of these people, but none of it is ever necessarily forced on me. I also really like how many options there are in the game. You have all these different armor sets, all these like a ton of different gems you can collect, and considering like the gems can improve depending on like the relationship of the different characters, and all the different characters can just improve the relationships just by battling with each other, and they get better, and then you have these heart-to-heart conversations that also, you know, improve that more, and the gems get stronger, and then that all just loops back into each other. The entire game systems all complement each other, and that's incredible because there's never really a moment where I feel like I have to stop doing any one particular thing so I can go focus on something else, because everything for the most part in this game loops back into each other and creates like a system where I end up doing everything anyway because I'm enjoying it, and everything, you know, benefits everything else. It's just, I don't know, I feel like the game is just masterfully done in that specific aspect. The armor system specifically also allows me to like change the character's appearance in case I have an appearance that I don't necessarily like. Future games would kind of get rid of this concept, and it was very disappointing to me because I feel like if you don't like the design of a main character, you don't really have the choice to change it. But in Xenoblade 1 you do, and I really do appreciate that in pretty much any game. Any game that allows me to change the appearance of my main character, that's always going to appreciate it. I just really like that system in general. Not just a Xenoblade 1 specific thing, but just, you know, I love that. I like that system. And the visions also, like I was talking about earlier, not only is it like in gameplay, you can also use it in a weird way when it comes to exploration, where while I'm exploring and doing things, if I happen to pick up an item that's necessary for a side quest in any way, you will get a vision hinting the fact that like this is going to become a relevant item at some point in the future. That is great. I like that. Every way you can implement any of these storyline concepts into gameplay is fantastic, and I love that. But I think I'm definitely keeping this a little too long than I originally intended. I just really like Xenoblade Chronicles 1. It is one of my favorite games of all time. It is my favorite JRPG of all time. But the whole point of this video was to keep this brief, so I'm going to end it here. Let me know in the comments down below if it's a game that you care about in any way. Have you played it? Have you tried it? Are you even interested in it or anything like that? But let me know in the comments down below how you feel about Xenoblade Chronicles 1. But until then, I'll see you guys in the next one.